What is going on here? This place is infested with nightmarish creatures. I need to be strong. I can't quit now. I've discovered that a surgical procedure is to be performed on 2 twin girls. I hope I can get to the operating room in time. There's something dark going on, something grim.
Tormented Souls is a survival horror game made to be a love letter to original Resident Evil and Silent Hill games. Developed by Dual Effect and Abstract Digital and released in August 2021, it seemed to me like one of those games that many easily overlook. In the game, you play as Caroline Walker, who's investigating a creepy mansion to find the whereabouts of 2 little girls. Tormented Souls didn't set the world on fire or redefine the genre when it was released. In many ways, it's a very modest game that stays remarkably close to the roots of its inspirations. It embraces fixed camera angles and manual save systems, mechanics that many modern players find dated, but for a certain type of horror fan, that lack of modernization is exactly what makes it a hidden gem. It's an honest game that prioritizes its identity over broad marketability. After clicking on a new game, the starting cutscene plays and it shows a young woman, our protagonist, Caroline Walker, sitting in a brightly lit room about to do her makeup. The doorbell rings, she receives a letter that I guess was personally handed to her, or maybe they just left it on the doorstep. Seems strange, but whatever. The letter itself is from a John Doe at Wildberger Hospital, and inside is a picture of 2 girls who appear to be twins. Upon seeing this picture, Caroline is racked by some pain in her head that goes away quickly. Flipping the image over is a short message reading simply as, "You just think you can abandon us here?" The shot changes as it's passing over water to an island with a foreboding-looking manor house. Caroline says that it's been 2 weeks since she received the letter, and she's had trouble sleeping ever since because of the nightmares. So, naturally, she decides to go to the hospital and figure out things about the girls and what it all means. Determined to find answers, she enters Wildberger Hospital, and despite the lights being on, it seems no one is home. Caroline doesn't get very far in her snooping when she suddenly gets knocked out from behind. When she finally comes to, she finds herself naked in a bath with an endotracheal tube down her throat. And yes, I had to look up what that actually was called. After ripping that out of her, she had the fortunate luck to have her clothes nearby, and then that's when the game officially begins as the reins are handed to the player. However, very soon after, another quick cutscene plays. Caroline notices that she has a bandage covering her right eye. After removing her bandages, it's revealed that her eye was removed, causing her to have a bit of an emotional breakdown given everything that's happened to her. Understandable. Now Caroline and the player are left wondering why the heck is this all going on, and who would do such a thing. And hoo-wee, you would not believe it if I told you, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The first order of business is, well, the door is locked. It is with this that the game presents us with our first puzzle. Tormented Souls is a game that is known for its difficult puzzles. Normally, I'm not one to really enjoy puzzles like that. If I can't figure out something after a few minutes of trying, then I'm probably going to go to Google for the answer. That said, I felt many of these were actually solvable with the clues. Or at the very least, if I did have to look up the answer, which I think was only a few times, then the clues made perfect sense rather than wondering how on earth anyone could figure it out. The locked door does a good job to show players exactly what they're getting into. Puzzles in Tormented Souls revolve around exploration first to find clues or items that might help you in solving them. In a lot of instances, the clue is on the item. Another thing this puzzle does is tell the player that they will have multiple steps in order to solve them. In this case, Caroline finds a journal entry of one William Wildberger talking about his wife Maria, having twins, and that his watch stopped working at the exact minute the first daughter was born. Maria takes that as a good sign and views the time as her lucky hour. Searching in a cupboard, she finds a padlock locking the one cupboard door and the said broken timepiece in the other, with the time being stuck at 12:35. And on the back, an engraving that says, "Time stood still when my 2 angels fell from heaven." So, input the time into the padlock to get a wrench that she can now use to open the door. Well, that is after she sets it correctly to grip the turn rod in the non-existent knob. Many puzzles follow this formula, and most of them aren't solved with everything in the same room. Exploration will eventually take players all over the manor house, and Caroline will still be finding items that will allow her to move into rooms in earlier areas of the house that were inaccessible at that time. And despite me saying that many of the puzzles are solvable with a bit of thought, there will probably be times when you'll need to set aside a puzzle and make progress elsewhere to allow time to think. Or at least that's how I played. I tend to find setting aside something difficult can bring new clarity when coming back to a problem. Anyway, before leaving out, it's also worth noting the warning written in blood? Hopefully it's just red paint. Do not let shadows embrace you is what's written, and that's super important. Because Caroline will just die. From a grue, probably. But the game is never really clear as to what exists in the shadows. Just avoid them. Which is rough for Caroline, considering that the moment she leaves the confines of the restroom turned creepy medical lab, she finds dark paths. Going down the candlelit corridor, she's lucky to find a creepy doll kind enough to offer us a light. Thanks, disturbing child mannequin. We're going to be using the lighter throughout a good chunk of the game. Luckily, we don't need to worry about it going out as we explore. The tone of the mansion has a gothic-looking interior complete with strange statues and tons of disturbing portraits. Like really, who hangs this up in their home? But it's mixed with things like chairs to wait in, bedpans, and many rooms are outfitted to act as areas in a hospital. This had once been the Wildberger Mansion, but Dr. William Wildberger turned it into a hospital when the original one burned down. I think it captures that sense really well. Everywhere seems really cluttered, but I imagine that's probably what my house would look like if I turned it into a hospital too. Okay, yeah, no, it just looks cluttered even if I didn't do that. With the game's emphasis on needing to light the way, it's no surprise to find that the lighting here is really well done. I love the way shadows flickered off the walls and how the complete darkness unfolds as Caroline moves through it, sometimes with something horrifying manifesting as the light casts over it. It's done so well, and I felt genuine fear as I moved through the hospital's halls. The fixed camera angles also exacerbate this feeling. While many may have played older survival horror titles and knew what to expect, I hadn't really played anything like this before. At times, the fixed angles did get in the way, but I guess that's the point. I felt this issue was more with combat when I couldn't see what Caroline could plainly see, which I felt was a bit unfair. That said, the fixed points do a lot to emphasize certain disturbing scenery or horrific events since the game pretty much always knows where the player is looking. There have been several times where something scary happens in a horror game, and since I turned at that exact moment, I miss it. That's not the case in Tormented Souls. After Caroline gets this lighter, she's able to explore a bit more freely. Well, except for the locked doors that are everywhere. Exploring around, she finds some items to pick up, and very quickly, I stopped asking why these things were where they were. As with the initial journal entry found in the starting room, we do find some others. I'll cover more on this later, largely because these won't really make much sense until we have more context. However, we do come across a report talking about a tribe of indigenous people, the Tismuit tribe, that existed on the island hundreds of years ago. And apparently they were in the habit of sacrificing twin children. In the examination room, we're introduced to Tormented Souls' saving mechanic. Unlike many other games, one does not simply press escape and then save game. Instead, Caroline needs to find recording tape and a tape player, or magnetophone as it's technically called. While it's not every time, I did appreciate that they had Caroline actually relay her thoughts on the tapes, rather than merely being a save mechanic.
Might be useful if anything happens to me. My name is Caroline Walker. I came to Wildberger Mansion seeking information about 2 girls in a photograph I received in the mail a couple of weeks ago. The last thing I remember before losing consciousness was arriving at the hospital and entering the mansion's main hall. I remember pain and then nothing. I woke up sometime later connected to a ventilation machine. And my eye had been removed. Why? Why would someone do such a thing? I don't know what the hell is going on in this place, but I need answers. Every time I close my eyes, I see those girls. Am I going insane?
Having never played a game where my saving was limited to a specific consumable item, I had mixed feelings about it. On one hand, it required me to play carefully because one bad move could bring hefty consequences depending on the last save. And I'd always need to decide when the best time to save was, since it was a limited commodity. On the other hand, we live in a day and age where autosaving is common, save scumming is a thing, and we don't usually need to backtrack that much if we do die. Furthermore, I just like being able to save whenever because sometimes life calls and you might just need to quit out of the game. That said, I thought that Tormented Souls was fairly forgiving with saving, and there was ample opportunity to save when needed. Although that's not immediately apparent. I didn't verify this, but I'm fairly certain that in the beginning, recording tape is much more scarce than by the end. So it created a situation where I kept putting off saving because I never knew when I'd have another recording tape. I always like to save at least one on hand just in case I needed to save quickly and get off. By the end, I had more recording tapes than I knew what to do with, and wished that maybe if the game had more evenly spaced those out, then I would have been more liberal in my use of them. That said, there were several times where I was really happy to come across a recording tape, so I imagine the mechanic elicited the emotions the devs wanted. After Caroline finishes venting her thoughts, it's off to the basement because what scary game wouldn't have us going to the basement? Upon entering the basement, we see what? Was that literally a monster in a wheelchair? Why, yes. Yes, it was. Here is the first enemy of the game, and in true horror game fashion, we need to run, and that takes us through a door into the X-ray room, where we meet our first NPC. Who the heck is this guy, and what is he doing here? Well, to answer the first question, he's apparently the town priest, and he knows Caroline, saying they met 2 days ago in the chapel. Caroline has no recollection of this. She asks what's happened here, and the priest tells her that the patients were moved into the new town hospital, with this manor house being left abandoned. He tells her there is evil going on here, and how to restart the generator to turn the lights back on. He also hands you a modified nail gun to protect yourself with because, yeah, that's a perfectly normal thing to be carrying around. I guess it's also convenient that there's been all these nails that we've been picking up as well. The whole exchange felt really strange to me. Caroline is clearly in a seriously messed up situation. Even when explaining there was some knife-wielding, wheelchair-crazed lunatic chasing her, the priest just shrugs it off without even acknowledging what she said.
A person in a wheelchair with knives in his hands was chasing me.
Oh, it's you. Don't you remember me? I'm the town priest.
Then there's Caroline, who in no way does what any normal person would do, such as A, be immediately suspicious of the guy because she still doesn't know who knocked her out, stripped her down, and plucked out her eye, or B, immediately ask for help to get out of here. No, instead she gathers information about the place and proceeds to carry on as usual. She has a few parting words with him, questioning him about the picture with the twins. He says there was an incident some years ago and they disappeared. If we want more information, then we could try the library. So, there we go, our next goal to work towards. With that, we leave him, but rest assured, this is not the last time we'll see each other. Afterwards, Caroline searches the room and also finds a handy crowbar. Making her way down another hall, it's here that I learned she can't have the lighter and nail gun equipped at the same time, which will be important for some fights later on. Right now, we rip the boards blocking our path, and then we have our next puzzle. Get the generator working. Simple enough, find the missing lever, reattach it, and adjust the pressure, or whatever we're adjusting, to the levels listed on the note. Then start her up. Although, not quite. The generator is very old, and every time I tried to turn it on, the gauge read one lower than what it was set to. This required more tinkering with the valves, and voila, we have lights. Now, I don't plan on going over every puzzle, but I wanted to highlight the clever use of the environmental storytelling to help players solve this. Even the priest mentions how the generator is old and acts up.
The old generator has been playing up. It happens sometimes.
Leaving the generator room, the game introduces us to our first combat, our crazed wheelchair friend. Combat in Tormented Souls is fairly simple. You go into aiming mode with your firearm and fire. While aiming, you can't move, but there is the option to dodge backwards. Luckily, the game is generous with auto-aiming, and as long as you could see your enemy, then you usually hit it when you shoot. So, with weapon in hand, there's now nothing to fear. Or that would be the case if this guy, and others like him, didn't take a lot of hits before finally dropping, and if ammunition wasn't so limited, and if you weren't constantly in close quarters with barely any room to maneuver. It's almost as if a melee weapon would come in handy. After the wheelchair guy, we have several other combat encounters in this wing of the hospital. They're essentially the same enemy, but without a wheelchair, making them a bit slower. In many of these fights, I wasn't sure if the game intended on me killing all of them, or if it wanted me to avoid fighting since I always seem to have just barely enough ammunition. There were several times where I was just running around and praying that I'd find some more ammo so I could return to a room to take out an enemy. While the dodge was useful at times, I found it better to run away and turn around to shoot. Would have been more helpful if I had a melee weapon to follow up on their missed attacks though, or even when you shoot them down for the first time. And, as mentioned, Caroline can only equip one thing in her hand at a time, so you can't hold both the lighter and nail gun. I thought I could be clever and just fire away in the dark, but you can't. You immediately start getting a warning that the darkness will imminently eat you if you don't light things up. Instead, she'll either need to find some way to light the room, either a switch or lighting candles, which were more common, or run away until she's better equipped. But anyway, back to Caroline. She needs to get to the main hall to eventually reach the library the priest mentions. In order to do so, we need to find a handle for the wrench socket we have. Now that the generator is working, it's opened up a few more rooms to explore. One of those rooms is the hospital's maternity ward. In the room, we find a woman who's died. She's actually holding the wrench handle that we need. Unfortunately, she has an iron grip on it, and we can't budge it. She's still hooked up to some sort of electrical machine to charge her heart, which isn't there. Within this room is also a flickering light with a note talking about how an electrician attempted to fix it. When trying to do so, an old man appeared out of nowhere and forcefully pulled the electrician away, telling him not to touch the bulb. Strange, but a useful clue. Tinkering with the light reveals a trapdoor that leads down into a small dark room with a bunch of creepy mannequins and a mirror with 2 unlit candles. After lighting the candles, cue jump scare, and then, like any sane person, step through this mirror that obviously isn't simply a mirror. Once on the other side, Caroline finds herself in some sort of upside-down version of the hospital, which admittedly isn't that much creepier than what we just came from. However, this dark world adds a new wrench in solving some of the puzzles and some story elements that ultimately never get addressed but are still interesting. Right now, there's not really much to do other than to go up the ladder and interact with a child mannequin laying on the same bed as the lady in the real world. Earlier, we found 2 pieces of a plastic heart, and once combined, we can place it in the child mannequin. Returning back to the real world, Caroline finds the body of the woman sewed up. Given the patient a zap once more loosens her grip on the handle, and Caroline can continue on. Funny enough, once you leave the room, she hears a scream, and if she returns to it, the body will be gone. Creepy. Now that we have what we need, Caroline can open the main hall doors and start exploring the new area. I felt this was where the game opened up a bit more, with seemingly several different places to explore, but many of them are actually just more locked off areas. Still, it's good to make a mental note of these things for the future as she gets more items. Exploring this section of the house really left me wishing I could save at any time. I kept wondering after every monster kill if I'd be able to keep it up for fear of running out of resources, or if I wouldn't be able to heal if I got hit one too many times. Then there was the other obvious thing of not wanting to save when you're close to death because you might screw yourself over. I decided from that point on to always keep 2 saves just in case so I could revert back if needed. Luckily, that was never the case. Anyway, as Caroline makes her way through the house, she finally arrives at the library. There, Caroline finds another picture of the twins and the implication that they're being prepared for surgery for some sort of diabolical ritual. Caroline assumes this note, written in blood I might add, to be a forewarning for what's to come and that she needs to find the twins before something bad happens.
It seems like the girls are being prepared for some kind of surgical procedure. If I don't find them soon, something terrible might happen. The plaque says Anna and Emma.
Which doesn't make a lot of sense given that the priest sort of implied that they died, but why trust the creepy old guy at face value? So, okay, let's roll with that. We leave the room and come across another wheelchair baddie. It's at this point where I started developing a cheese strategy for each of my fights, and that was to leave the room before they could attack. Wait for a bit so they aren't immediately on the other side of the door, then re-enter the room and fire off some more shots. Rinse and repeat until the enemy is dead. Sometimes this didn't work if I screwed up, aka getting too greedy, but it helped a lot in preserving health and really just getting around the combat. I mean, it's passable for what it is, but it could be better. In the dining hall, we come across our friend, the definitely not suspicious at all priest. What the heck is he doing here?
Don't you see, child? I'm eating some soup.
Okay then, that's reasonable. And wait, what?
Oh my, what is this doing in my soup?
Yeah, that's definitely strange. Especially when we see just how big that screw is later. After that bit of catching up, Caroline informs the priest about the twins and that she suspects someone means to do surgery on them. He gives her the equivalent to, "Oh no," anyway, and essentially just tells her that there's an operating room on the 2nd floor in the west wing. However, she'll need to fiddle with the electrical lock to get the door open. Then he goes back to eating his soup and probably thinking how Caroline is the most gullible person he's ever met. I think there's also something to be said about Caroline and her as a character. She has been so narrowly focused on one thing this entire game, and that's finding out about these twins. Nothing else seems to really faze her beyond that brief moment we get when she finds out she's missing an eye, despite all the crazy things she's seen up to this point. Instead, most of her dialogue and inner thoughts tend to be on finding out more about the twins and what is going on in the hospital. Escaping the hospital doesn't even seem to be a priority to her. Oh, and I forgot to mention, but the front door to this place is locked, which is pretty much a given in a story like this. Heck, even just survival seems to be not high up on the list. Clearly, Caroline must be built different from the average person. After clearing out some more enemies, we get to the room with the electric lock. Using the screw as a conductor, Caroline can get the door open. And yeah, look at that thing. It's huge. How was it even in his soup to begin with? Now she has access to the operating room. Or not really, as there is another similarly locked door. After some elevator shenanigans and moving around that screw, now she could enter. There's some more baddies to kill and of course rooms to explore. In one of them, Caroline ends up meeting our priest friend again. She asks him what the heck is going on, then she asks him if he could see the strange man walking around with the lit candelabra in a dark room through the viewing window.
What are you talking about, child? I don't see anything.
No, of course he can't. Instead, he tells her that she must be hallucinating and she needs to take care of herself. Caroline replies by saying that she's not sure what's real or a product of her own imagination anymore. I thought this was a bit strange. Up until this point, the game, and by extension Caroline's character, had not shown her losing grasp of reality. I suppose just the bizarre and supernatural things she's seen thus far has her questioning it, though. Whatever the priest may be thinking, we don't know, as he, once again, ignores that and proceeds to talk about something completely different. This time around, he tells us a story about a tribe who used to live on the island. Oh yeah! That one note we read about the Tismuit tribe near the beginning of the game. Anyway, when the tribe was plunged into darkness, shamans would dance around their dead in order for the dead to walk. What? How the heck is Caroline still okay with this creep? There are so many things she could be asking him right now, like, where are the twins if they're not here? Why are there monsters everywhere? Did he knock her out and cut out her eye? No, she's not going to inquire about any of this. Well, okay, I guess that's par for the course by now. Once again, I just can't help but feel how weird their exchanges are. This encounter did give me some things to consider, though. First, the priest definitely knew what was on the other side of the glass given the story he just told, and is gaslighting her. And two, maybe the priest is actually a figment of her imagination used as a way to keep her sanity together. Not everything is said, explained, or even addressed, since she's essentially just having a conversation with herself. Anyway, it's about here when I had absolutely no idea what to do. Up until this point, I thought the puzzles had been fairly logical in how to solve them. That being said, I suppose this one kind of was. I was just too thick to figure it out, and instead went to a guide. However, before I looked up the solution, I did give it the old college try. I'll admit, I was a bit frustrated here with the lack of a sprint button. Obviously, it would make things too easy if Caroline could sprint away from the monsters, especially since many of them are paraplegic. Additionally, all the tight corridors along with the fixed angles doesn't really make a lot of sense to have sprinting. But when you're wandering around the house, interacting with everything just to figure out how to progress, well, it becomes a bit of a chore. Luckily, there are a lot of shortcuts that Caroline can open up, so it isn't so bad, especially later once you start opening up all parts of the mansion. Well, the answer to my dilemma dealt with the room where Caroline saw the man walking around in a circle. It's the operating room, but when you go inside, there is no creepy guy. Well, no one alive at least. There seems to be a body on the operating table, but nothing else other than the ability to turn the lights on and off. So, wait, was the priest actually telling the truth? Or maybe we were peering into the upside down? Either way, the candelabra holding man and the priest's story are the keys to figuring out this puzzle. That I didn't even realize was the puzzle until looking it up. In order to proc this room's secrets, Caroline needs to turn out the lights and walk around the operating table in the same direction as the man she saw, so counterclockwise. If she does this enough times, the body will twitch and eventually rise up to attack her. Luckily, with the newly acquired shotgun in hand, we're able to dispatch him easily and grab the scalpel he was hiding. With the scalpel in hand, Caroline can now cut the rope that had closed the hatch to another part of the basement. Don't ask why we couldn't have used our lighter to burn the rope, or the crowbar to loosen it. Well, it's not an immersive sim, so we needed the scalpel. Once down there, she finally makes her way to the morgue. She discovers a secret passageway that leads into another room where secret autopsies were conducted along with holding cells at the end of a long hall. In one of the cells, Caroline finds the skeleton of a young girl and a VHS tape labeled Experiment. For my younger audience, a VHS is what we used to use to watch movies, kinda like a DVD. Although, you may not know what one of those are either. Wow, that makes me feel old. When exploring the second floor, we came across a room that seemed to be some sort of lounging area. It had a VHS player connected to a projector, so naturally, I took Caroline there and popped the tape into the player. This projected a still image on the screen, and then Caroline was able to walk through it in a similar way she passed through the mirror. But instead of entering the Shadowfell, she travels into the past. Admittedly, it's not really much better. She finds herself in the secret room again and has to solve a riddle to get back into the area with the cells. Once there, she finds a young girl named Anna locked away in one of the cells. She'll tell Caroline that while her father was away on a business trip, Anna's grandfather locked her up in this cell. Additionally, he also captured her mother as well and took her somewhere. So typical family drama. In an attempt to help, Caroline dumps some acid on a lock, but this will take a couple days to eat away the metal. Seems rough, but I guess that's the best we could do for her. Caroline also asks about the photo of the twins she received. She tells Anna that it was sent to her a couple of weeks ago, which unnerves Anna because her father literally took it the day before. Anna decides that she no longer trusts Caroline anymore and doesn't want to speak with her.
I'm not talking to you anymore. That acid was probably another lie to fool me. You never wanted to help me get out.
Anna, you have to listen to me. I need you to trust me. I am your friend.
I don't want to talk to you anymore.
With nothing left to do, since all other passages are blocked, Caroline returns to the present. Luckily, her help wasn't for naught, because when Caroline returns to check the cell, she doesn't see the skeleton of a girl. Instead, we now see the doors open with a special key that will help us open a ton of doors and a diary entry of the young girl. Up till now, I haven't really mentioned that much about the underlying background plot unfolding in the diary entries Caroline finds, and that's largely because it's told out of order and in small chunks. Part of the fun was trying to figure out how these entries connected together. Some seemed obvious, while others required a bit more exploration or another entry to start making sense. Essentially, it goes like this. The doctor, Juan Wildberger, and his wife Maria are trying to have kids but continue to have miscarriages. This greatly affects their psyche, especially Maria's. However, Maria does eventually bear children, which are twin girls, Anna and Emma. The wife's father is a psycho and kidnaps one of the twins. Maria finds out and attempts to save her daughter, but gets captured in the process. What we also know up to this point is that William's father is also a psycho, as he apparently had been conducting experiments on Maria in secret, which involved planting fetuses inside her. Damn, that's messed up. Somewhere along the line, Maria suffers from a disease, both twins are missing, and the doctor is left trying to pick up the pieces and desperately find a cure for his ailing wife by conducting unethical experiments on others. Like father, like son, I guess. Now we're all caught up with the story revealed thus far, and I'll make a point to address additional entries as they come up. Now with the special symbol key in hand, it's time to feel smart about figuring out some of these door puzzles. Or dumb, depending on how you look at it. I'll give myself a pat on the back for this one though, since I was able to figure out all of them without needing to look them up. Although, they did stump me for a time. We also managed to get some more random items, like this blood bag, from a vending machine. What the hell is wrong with this place? After unlocking the other part of the West Wing on the second floor, Caroline gains access to more of the patient rooms. It's here where we meet, yep, you guessed it, our priest buddy. Except, wait, what the heck? What happened? Caroline tries talking to him, but the priest is in shock because, well, he's missing his arm and probably lost a lot of blood. Instead of doing the most obvious things like trying to bandage him or create some kind of makeshift tourniquet from her first aid, she goes to explore. Okay, Caroline. And wouldn't you know it, in the very next room is a familiar looking mirror. So light the candles and away we go to the Shadow Realm. In the parallel dimension version of the room with the priest, we see a mannequin sitting on the bed with its arm missing. Some more exploring nets us a scroll with a story entitled Monkey Thief, a hammer, and a plastic arm of the mannequin. Seems like a no-brainer, but when you attempt to put the arm back on the mannequin, it falls off with nothing to hold it there. Back in the real world, the priest is still suffering, but Caroline will ignore that for a bit longer to do some more exploration. In these rooms, she finds a podium with a spot for a scroll and several blocks with different versions of a monkey on it. After matching them up to the story, Caroline receives a staple gun. No, it's not another weapon, but it is the thing we need to help that ailing mannequin, because clearly the mannequin is in much more critical condition than the actual living person in the other room. Although obviously, that's what we needed to do all along. When Caroline returns to the priest, she finds that his arm is somehow reattached to his body. The priest mentions how that thing stole his Bible, but it's Caroline's turn to ignore that and tell him he needs rest. The priest thanks her for her help, but she claims it wasn't her. He tells her that he saw her, but quickly retracts that and agrees, saying he's confused. In fact, it was actually Dr. Wildberger who took care of his arm. Caroline hadn't realized that the doctor was still around and asked where she could find him to learn more about the twins. The priest replies that the doctor is probably in his office and that he wasn't actually aware that he had any daughters. likely story. Anyway, the priest also gives her a handy battery-operated light that she could clip to her jacket. This makes fighting enemies in the dark much easier. Why didn't he give her this from the start? Obviously, the doctor's office is Caroline's new target, but she still needs a few things. So it's back to figuring out more puzzle doors and gathering useful things like a battery, a floppy disk, and a symbol mold. It's around this time that new enemies start roaming the halls as well. And no, not new enemy types, just more of the same but in areas we've previously cleared. We also find a new videotape, so back to the time-traveling projector. This time we find ourselves in the chapel area of the house and seemingly not that far back in time. The house is in disarray but looking familiar. The statue of Jesus hasn't been destroyed yet either, and who would be sitting by the statue? The helpful and creepy father. Although, I guess he's technically not our friend yet, since from his perspective, Caroline and him haven't met yet. Oh yeah, wait a minute.
Oh, it's you. Don't you remember me?
He doesn't have much to say this time other than telling Caroline the statue is definitely not destroyed and he takes good care of it. Well, clearly something went wrong. Caroline then confides in him, saying that things feel off, and the priest just shrugs it off as per usual.
I've been here before, and yet I feel like I don't belong here.
That's a familiar feeling when you arrive at a new place. Give it some time. Everything will fall into place.
After what seems like a pointless conversation, I'm left wondering why Caroline had to come back here. Well, for timey-wimey stuff, of course. We have to make sure that our blood-filled mold is in the freezer, along with putting a car battery we found on the charger. Then, when we step back into the present, we have a frozen symbol which will be used as a key, and we have a charged battery to use so we could power the lift to get us to the higher section of the library, which gets us another key we'll need alongside the symbol. Now it's finally time for Caroline to find Dr. William in his office and get some answers. To get access, we'll need to go through the bedroom and children's room, but in order to get into the bedroom, we need a floppy disk with the right code written on it. Okay, so guess it's not time. But did you really think it would be? Anyway, this floppy disk, ooh boy, this was another puzzle I needed to look up. Although it was partially my own fault for not inspecting the floppy closely, and I guess for forgetting how they worked since it's been years since I've used one. Obviously, the names were the key to figuring out the right code, along with the simple math problem you can see when flicking back the top of the sliding piece. However, every time I input the correct answer, it kept telling me the drive was write protected. I felt really stupid when inspecting it again and remembering that floppies were protected by simply physically moving a switch on the disk. So, disk in hand, I went back to the bedroom door and was able to get in. Although, hold up a second. Why was their door locked with the scanner for a floppy disk with the specific name on it in the first place? That seems highly excessive, but he is running secret experiments, so I guess it makes sense. In the bedroom, we find a diary entry of Maria explaining how she made these dresses for her girls. They went out to play and promptly ruined them. Maria was understandably upset and punished her kids. Anna seemed apologetic and genuinely upset about what had happened, whereas Emma, the other twin, seemed not to care and kinda implied she was a bit unhinged. This sort of felt like a red herring to me since we pretty much see nothing more about this observation of Emma. With nothing left to take a look at, Caroline enters the next room and is met with this monstrosity. Man, this guy. The game definitely could have done a better job conveying that this wasn't supposed to be a fight you could win. I'm not sure how I didn't come to this conclusion sooner, but I wasted a lot of electric lance charges on it, only to realize all it did was stun the monster. And it's actually pretty slow, so it was a huge waste of resources. I would have reloaded, but at that point I had already done so much that I didn't want to have to replay it at all. Although, as I said earlier, by this stage in the game I had so many recording tapes that I could have easily saved, and I would have been fine. But alas, hindsight is 20/20, as they say. Once I finally realized that I needed to run, Caroline moves into the children's room. Here she finds another diary entry that talks about the mother and daughter's attempt to escape from Noah, the evil grandfather and father to Maria. In their scuffle, Emma, one of the twins, falls from a great height into water below. Noah believes Emma to be dead and tells Anna that the ritual is now pointless because it required both twins. Upon leaving, I fully expected to run into Ugly again, but found that it was nowhere to be seen. Phew! Caroline finally enters the office of Dr. William Wildberger, where she comes face to face with him at last. Except, he's dead. On his desk is his final diary entry. We learn that it was he who knocked out Caroline and was experimenting on her. He did this so that he could find a cure for Maria. He achieved this, but it was only enough to bring her back to her senses briefly before passing on. In her moment of clarity, she told William that it was Noah who had taken their children all those years ago. The doctor swore he would take his revenge, but only realized that the wine he was drinking was poisoned. The presumption is that the poison killed him, and I guess he helped his wife at least? With the heavy-handed environmental clue, which I actually appreciated immensely, and a can of WD-40, it's time to go back into the Upside Down from the beginning of the game. Once I stepped through this door is when I really started to have to choose my fights more carefully because I didn't have much in the way of ammunition. Although, despite there being moments of lamenting the lost or wasted resources, I think most of the fights I felt I had to clear in order to progress. I was really starting to wonder if I somehow got myself into an impossible situation, since the game seemed to be a bit stingy with ammunition at this point. But that was an issue for future me. Once I retrieved the Jade Eye, then it's back to the office to use it and open another secret room. Why the heck was the house built this way? Once down there, I came across another one of those big guys again. I'm thinking that I'm royally screwed because of how much ammunition I'll need to use to bring him down. However, it's at this moment that I realize I can equip the crowbar. The crowbar is a weapon. A weapon I could have been using this whole time and probably would have saved me a ton of ammunition for all those times I could have finished a prone enemy. Live and learn, I guess, but what a pity that I found this out so late. I think the crowbar has only been used once or twice to pry off some nailed boards, and since it was used in a utility fashion rather than as a weapon, I always assumed it was just a tool. I guess I should have thought otherwise since it was in the resources inventory tab along with the other weapons, rather than in the items tab. Anyway, we come across Bertram's diary, who is William's father, and find that he's talking about trying to bring about some god or something. Basically, it seems that neither the doctor's father nor the wife's father were right in the head. We also get his key card, which is the last of the 3 keys we need to access the mausoleum and start kicking this into the final sections of the game. Down one of the halls, Caroline finds herself in the Infinite Room, which has a series of riddles you need to solve in order to progress. There's various elements and doors made out of different materials. The riddle tells the player what they should choose. Make the right choice, and it progresses to the next riddle until she can leave. Or make the wrong choice, and the riddles reset. Most of them were fairly straightforward, but luckily there isn't really any repercussion if you get something incorrect. Actually, as I was thinking about it, it's pretty much that way for all of the puzzles. There are no consequences or fail states, no alarms or loud noises to alert enemies, no loss of any items. I appreciated that the game didn't punish you for not being able to figure out their puzzles right away. In the next room, Caroline encounters more enemies, of which I now had her using her crowbar a lot more to preserve what little ammo she had. And ouch, maybe I need to find a proper balance so Caroline doesn't end up using all of her healing items instead. Once past those guys, she enters a dark room with an article talking about sacrificed twins. Probably to some sort of dark god, I'd imagine. Additionally, she also finds a syringe filled with a blue liquid. This will be super important later on, so let's hold on to this. Further into the mausoleum and actually down yet another secret passage into the sewers, we find some more diary entries from Anna talking about how she survived down here for years. Apparently, she did manage to escape her cell because of Caroline's help with the lock. Unfortunately, Anna was recaptured and locked down in the sewers. She was unable to leave, but somehow found food and water to subsist off of for years. Honestly, I found that really hard to believe, but when someone is put in extreme scenarios, I guess they find a way. Anna seems to have a bit of rage because of her sister, who she believes managed to escape when Emma fell from the bridge. Additionally, Caroline reads a message scrawled in blood telling Emma to stay away. However, we also learn that Noah, their evil maternal grandfather, and not to be confused with their evil paternal grandfather, learned Emma was still alive and that he could now finish the ritual. Anna claims that in order to do so, Noah will need her eyes, so she decided to deny him that and presumably cut out her own eyes. And wait a minute. In Anna's makeshift sewer abode, there's also a mirror back to the Shadow Realm. So, yeah, you know what time it is.
It's time to
oh, wait a minute. This is not what I expected at all. Instead of being greeted by the dark halls of evil, Wild Burger Mansion, Caroline finds herself in a sunlit bedroom. Her bedroom, in fact, which is supposedly quite a distance from the island. It's here when we learn about the nightmares that Caroline had after receiving the photo of the twins. Essentially, she had been dreaming of Anna living in the sewers, but it had been strange because it was her. She also had something written about seeing the same images on the television. However, the television in the room is missing its dial to change the station. But after stepping back into the deranged hospital and clearing away some water in a room not too far off, Caroline can find a replacement dial to bring with her. Flipping through the channels reveals a series of images. These need to be cycled in a particular order, which can be determined from Anna's diary entry back in her sewer room. After this, a brief video plays before the television breaks, revealing the second part of the Eclipse necklace. How did this thing end up inside her television? I probably need to stop asking these questions. That being said, humor me another tangent. Despite having a super easy way out of this mess, Caroline voices how she feels compelled to stay and go back into the mirror to save those girls. At this point, sure, whatever you say. At the very least, though, shouldn't she be getting more supplies or something? Food? First aid? A gun? On short of that, running down to the hardware store for a few boxes of nails? I don't know. Anything would be better than going back into that hellscape with what she has right now. To attempt to give her the benefit of the doubt, I assume she believes time is of the essence, and maybe so. Remembering the small insert in the wall for a medallion in the children's room, I take Caroline back there and place the Eclipse necklace inside. It fits perfectly, which opens a secret room. Seriously, just how many secret rooms does this house have? Anyway, the rooms seem to be some sort of children's play area. Why was it a secret room, though? And inside is a music box.
Oh, my head. Oh.
Caroline has a flash of memories flood back to her when she opens the box. She is, in fact, Emma, the twin that fell into the water. Somehow she survived, presumably ended up in a foster family, although there's no mention of this, and then someone sent her the picture to get her to come back to the manor house. And we'll talk more about that last point later. She also realizes that the priest is actually Noah, their grandfather. Aha! I knew it! I knew this creepy dude couldn't be trusted. I know they say don't judge a book by its cover, but this was definitely one of those cases where you could. Caroline decides that it's time to put an end to all this by going through the vault door in the sewers, and hopefully save her sister. Except there's one small problem. The vault door requires a retina scan in order to be opened. Oh, okay, so that's what Anna meant about needing her eyes. I definitely thought it was going to be more evil ritual than something as mundane as a retina scanner. However, there are 2 scanners, so essentially it required both of the twins in order to open the door. Well, before this huge bomb-dropping revelation, when you come back up from the sewer in William's office, now realized to be Caroline's, or actually Emma's father, you find that his body is missing. What happened to it? When I first saw this, I assumed that maybe the poison hadn't killed him, but he was really weakened. Caroline would see him later and he'd have a realization. But no, his body is just gone. Maybe the floating monster ate him. Which, yikes. Double yikes for story implications that we'll find out near the end. And oh yeah, forgot to mention, but that floating invincible monster Caroline came across a while ago, the one I wasted all those electric lances on, well, it will occasionally spawn in rooms you enter to give chase. Now, you could try to outmaneuver it, or I suppose waste more resources on it. However, the easiest thing to do is just to leave the room from the way you came, and then re-enter. Every time the monster spawns, it always spawns when you first enter a room, so never randomly when you're walking through or exploring. Additionally, it's accompanied by tense music that plays, so you immediately know the monster is there, even if you don't see it. Definitely some oversight that happened when planning those chase sequences. Anyway, on the doctor's desk is a large button that when pressed, yeah, you guessed it, a secret room opens up. Just kidding. But it is a secret compartment though. This reveals another time-traveling tape to use, so cue the Back to the Future music because we're about to see some serious shit. This time around, the tape doesn't take Caroline back in time that far at all, probably only a few hours. It is shortly after she's been knocked out. William has experimented on her, thinking her to be some random house intruder, and not realizing that this is, in fact, one of his daughters that he presumed to be dead. I know it's been 14 years, so it probably would have been hard to recognize her, but damn, that really sucks. In his journal entry, he mentions how he was able to make a cure from Caroline's blood, but with a caveat. It would only be good enough to restore the infected for a few brief moments before they would inevitably pass on. He claims this to be the best he could do, as evident from the earlier entry we found that takes place after this when he learns Noah was the one to blame. Well, Caroline enters the bathroom where she was being held and sees her unconscious body attached to these machines. Instead of trying to wake herself up or anything normal, because that's not what we do here, Caroline bends down over herself and cuts out her own eye. Yep, she's the one who did it. It's absolutely insane, but she realizes that there's no way to open the vault door without being in 2 places at the same time. Which is ironic, given that's literally what's going on right now. It gets even more ironic with how she could have approached that, which I'll talk about when we get to the ending. And I know I'm being nitpicky here, but how in the heck was she able to cut out her eye so surgically precise and not, I don't know, mess up? I mean, was she training to be an optical surgeon or something? Back at the vault door, Caroline shoves that eye, or maybe delicately places it, on a fishhook and strings it up by one of the retina scanners. Then Caroline stands near the other with her one good eye. The door opens, revealing an empty room. Noah walks in at that moment and reveals, yeah, another secret passageway. Anyway, then he monologues for a bit. He tells Caroline how her mother was stupid, and that now the twins can achieve their destiny, as tools for bringing about his god. She wants to stop him, but instead of dropping him right then and there, she lets him walk off. He taunts her with if you want to learn everything, then follow me, as if he doesn't actually need her for all of this to work in the first place. But I guess he knows that she's not going to not follow him.
Your sister is just another tool for me to awaken our Savior. Follow me if you want your answers.
Hey, wait! Where do you think you're going?
And somehow this bunker has every manner of obstacles to get past and monsters to fight. Honestly, I have no idea how Noah managed it since we walked in right after him. But hey, that's been the case from the get-go with him, so I guess we just continue suspending our disbelief. Oh, and something fun to point out, but it's on this puzzle that we finally use the lock we've been holding on to for almost the entire game after breaking out of the restroom Caroline was initially held in. Through all this monster fighting, scavenging, and puzzle solving, we discover a couple of things. First, Bertram Wildberger, while evil because he purposely poisoned his own daughter-in-law to get her to birth twins that he would then sacrifice in order to appease his cult's god, does get cold feet a little while later and ultimately tries to help Maria save the children. So I mean, hey, I guess he's not all bad. And secondly, the so-called Pollock set was locked in this vault and had radiation suits to protect them from the radiation emanating from the thing deeper inside. Except that it didn't really, but just slowed down the negative effects. Many believed their work to be evil and not the work of God. And yeah, probably not the work for the God they thought it was for anyway. Also, to make sure there's no confusion, both Bertram and Noah were part of the Pollock set. As far as I understand from what I read online, Bertram had been the leader with Noah hot on his heels. Obviously, Bertram had qualms about betraying his family in the end, whereas Noah didn't seem to care about his daughter or his granddaughters. However, I find it strange that Noah can still order around the somehow still living members of the sect. I mean, first, they thought that what they were doing was evil, but past that, would their minds even still be intact? The assumption here is that they've been locked in this vault for at least since Caroline and Anna were kids, but assuming they had any shred of higher thought left in these guys, then maybe they believe Noah's newfound hope that he can pull off the ritual with both of the twins. And that's because Noah reveals to Caroline that Anna is actually the evil floating monster that's been chasing you around this whole time. I think the assumption is that the radiation has affected her in a similar way that it's affected others, but I don't know. It seems weird that she seemed in a relative right state of mind until recently when she found out that Noah had found out Caroline, or Emma, was alive. Don't question it, I guess. Anyway, Noah assumes that his lackeys will be able to subdue Caroline in order to make the final preparations for the ritual. However, Caroline is the main character. Instead, she beats those hammer dudes, and now this is where things can go one of three ways. AKA, the three different endings you can get that all revolve around how Caroline interacts with Anna. If Caroline does nothing and walks past her to continue to the final confrontation, then you get, objectively, the worst ending. When Caroline finally goes to leave the manor, Anna will sneak up on her and attack her, implying that Caroline meets her end. Instead, she can decide to mercy kill her sister with her knife. When Caroline leaves the house, she's filled with remorse for everything that's happened and presumably returns to her old life.
After all, no matter how hard we want it, we can't change the past.
The canon ending, and best ending, is when Caroline uses the blue antidote she found earlier on Anna. This returns Anna to her true self, and there's a brief moment where it seems Anna has recognition of her sister before dying. This reveals bolt cutters that can be used later. Alternatively, a player can use the antidote and not use the bolt cutters at a particular moment, leading to the former ending with Caroline leaving by herself. Before I get into that final scene, let's jump back to Caroline and Noah's confrontation. Which really isn't much of one if I'm being honest. She enters this chamber and sees a giant heart thing in the middle of the room attached to a metal cross. Above it sits a huge drill that I assume was used to excavate this horrific thing. Noah is standing on a platform with an altar. He explains to Caroline that even without twins it doesn't matter. His faith alone will be enough to rejuvenate his god.
This is over, Noah. Your gruesome dream ends here. Without the blood of the twins, you won't be able to bring that thing back to life.
I have waited so long to revive our Savior. I will show you that my faith has no limit.
Uh-huh. Pretty sure you would have tried that a long time ago if you really thought that. Desperate times call for desperate measures, though. And with that, Noah slits both of his wrists and lets the blood pool in these large goblets before toppling over dead. A monster bursts forth from the large writhing heart and seems to be the source of the radiation. It starts attacking Caroline by shooting projectile blood at her. Luckily, it's all fairly easy to dodge, and the biggest hurdle was figuring out what I needed to do. Caroline needs to first attack the boss, which allows her to gain access to one of 3 different devices that the creature normally guards with its tendrils. Once she interacted with a device, I needed to complete a simple puzzle which releases one of the bolts holding up the drill overhead. Once all 3 are released, then Caroline can finish the boss by shooting the loosely tethered drill, and it comes crashing down, presumably killing the nascent god.
It's over, Noah. How many girls were sacrificed for that thing? Those bastards won't hurt anyone ever again.
As far as boss battles go, well, this one was the only one. We had some moments that were supposed to be more challenging set encounters, but it all just revolves around the game's standard combat loop. While it wasn't anything special, I did appreciate the devs taking the time to design something more intricate than walk around in circles and shoot when you have an opening. Caroline leaves the carnage behind, but before leaving the manor, assuming you use the antidote on Anna, she takes one last trip to the past. Back to Anna's cell where she had helped her some time ago. Or a long time ago, depending on how you look at it. The lock is still sizzling from the acid, but this time, she pulls out her bolt cutters and the lock falls away. Caroline explains to Anna how she needs to come with her to get her to a safe time. Anna is reluctant because she wants to save her mother, who was captured as well. Caroline insists that once they get out, they can go to the village and ask for help, stating they have no weapons while blatantly holding one right in front of her. Anna doesn't question this logic and goes with Caroline, who leads her back through the projector and into the future. Anna is confused by the state of things, and Caroline promises to explain everything to her in due time. The game ends with Caroline feeling sorry for her actions, presumably because they can't actually save the mother, and maybe for the fact that she left her sister in this situation to begin with. Although that can hardly be considered her fault, given the events were so traumatic that her mind buried them deep.
Anna, I'm aware that my actions were wrong. Once you find out the truth, I hope you can forgive me. Anna.
And that's a wrap, sorta. At the end of all this, I felt like it left us with a bunch of questions. Or at least, I had a bunch of questions. But first, if you enjoyed the video up until now, then I would appreciate you giving the video a like and /or leaving a comment. This is different from the stuff I've made before and would love to hear your thoughts on it. And if you're feeling extra generous, then you could tip me via YouTube Super Thanks or consider joining my YouTube membership. Every little bit goes a long way to help improve the channel, especially for videos like this, which take a ton of time to make. Anyway, back to the plot holes? Or so they seem. First, who sent Caroline the photo to begin with? The likely answers seem to be Noah. He wanted to lure her to the manor in order to use her for the sacrifice. However, this doesn't make sense because he assumes she died when she fell from the bridge. Except, there's a moment where Caroline goes back in time and meets Noah sitting in front of the statue of Jesus. There's an exchange of greetings, but it's not much more than that. I suspect that Noah recognized her after this point and set out to find her, which is how he came across where she lived and sent her the picture. Which is a good theory, But Noah literally tells Caroline when she came across him that they met in the chapel 2 days before. And she had said that she had had the photo for a couple of weeks before heading out to the island. So that wouldn't add up either. That being said, he could have just been saying 2 days. Additionally, maybe he found out about Caroline's existence and sent her the photo in advance. Then when he saw her in the chapel, he knew that she would arrive and was confident he could pull off the ritual. Of course, there's also the issue of Caroline needing to have gone to the manor in the first place in order for him to have recognized her. But let's not think too hard when it comes to timey-wimey stuff, especially because the writers didn't seem to want it to make sense anyway. Another person you might be able to argue is her sister Anna, but she was locked up in the sewers the whole time, so it doesn't seem likely. Who knows? Maybe it was Caroline who sent the picture with her repressed memories coming to surface in her subconscious from time to time. I have no clue. And all this leads into the questions I have about the time travel. I'm pretty sure we all knew this was going to be brought up. Anything with time paradoxes is always going to be a sticking point for a narrative. The most obvious question is why and how. And that's actually two, but whatever. Unfortunately, those answers aren't explained, and it's just a convenient plot point to create some interesting puzzle solutions and drive the story forward. Essentially, though, we have 3 timelines. The first is where Anna gets locked up by Noah after he believes Emma died. However, Anna is useless to him as a sacrifice. Ultimately, she died in the cell, probably from starvation. We know this is the case because we see her skeleton in the cell before Caroline's initial travel back in time. However, when Caroline pours the acid on the lock, it creates a new timeline because the skeleton is no longer there when she returns. This kind of suggested to me that time isn't some sort of circular logic, since there was clear cause and effect. This obviously flies in the face of the potential theory that Noah sent the photo only after meeting Caroline in the chapel, and really doesn't work for pulling Anna into the present without messing up the timeline or the fact that Caroline cut out her own eye. I love time travel stories, but I feel they are almost never consistent enough to make complete sense.
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
Anyway, in this version of the timeline, Anna is freed, but then recaptured shortly after and locked in the sewers. She survived down there for years, and honestly it seems like Noah just forgets about her. She gets weaker over the years, presumably because of the radiation, and seems to resent her sister. When Noah learns of Caroline, he goes to check on Anna and is surprised but happy to see her alive. In order to prevent her grandfather from using her for his dark ritual, she cuts out her own eyes and writes the message in blood to Emma to stay away. Somewhere in that time, it seems like the radiation fully affects her and she transforms into the monstrous creature we see in the game. I have 2 thoughts here. The first is about the connection that Anna and Caroline have as twins. Caroline had dreams of her sister, and I wonder if Anna did as well. It would make sense with the resentment against her because Caroline/Emma was able to get away. And perhaps the message in blood was something she hoped Caroline would see without actually going to the manor. Maybe I'm thinking too hard though. My other thought is, why was it that she seemed to have her facilities together all that time up until shortly before Caroline came? I wondered if it had something to do with her eyes. Maybe once cutting out her eyes, she lost whatever was keeping her from turning into a monster. Or perhaps she was already in transition, but that was never made apparent. Finally, we have the third timeline, which is the one where Caroline pulls Anna through time, and she isn't subjected to all those horrors. Well, a lot of them anyway. Which, once again, if this was simple cause and effect, well, that would undo so many things that happened, so that can't be the case. And if you can just pull people through time with no repercussions, then Caroline could have saved her eye when she saw herself, but that would have been an entire can of worms I'm sure the writers didn't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. What was up with the darkness killing Caroline? Admittedly, I didn't die from it very much after the first time I stumbled into it, but why was this the case at all? From a gameplay perspective, I understand that it controls the player's movement on where they could go, and there weren't even that many instances where you were in the dark with a monster. If that was the case, then you always had a way to light candles or turn on the lights. And by around the halfway point, the whole mechanic becomes moot because you get a light that you don't need to hold. Narratively, there didn't seem to be much of a reason. It seems that the answer may lie with the articles on the Tizmuit tribe, since darkness is mentioned a couple of times. However, it doesn't really leave us with any explanation. The final question I have, although I can probably think of several more if I thought about it longer, feels very similar to the time travel question. What is up with traveling into the dark world version of the nightmare? Once again, this is something that is not explained. There seems to be the obvious implied theme of the twins and the duality of how each one lived their lives. In Caroline's diary, she talks about how she has a dream where she's seeing herself as Anna in a dark and damp place, being the sewers. But that's the closest we get to anything with this mirror dimension. And then one of those times the mirror just takes Caroline to her bedroom. It feels like the rules were thrown out at that point, assuming there were any rules to begin with. For any of its flaws, the game was well made and enjoyable. I was interested in learning about the story and piecing together elements as I explored the manor. I think any story like this is going to have various plot holes or things the writers didn't think about, especially when it comes to alternate dimensions and time travel, or maybe they just didn't care about it at all and they just put in what they wanted. The puzzles were difficult, but I felt many of them made sense and felt good to solve once things finally clicked. By the end, I'll admit I was getting a bit impatient and started looking up more of the solutions if I couldn't figure it out after a few minutes. Combat, on the other hand, well, it's there. I wish there could have been more to highlight the fact that you could use the crowbar, but maybe that was me being stupid. The controls of the game, while obviously inspired by classics, don't mesh well for combat, I felt. The fixed camera angles made it awkward at times with the stiff movement. I did appreciate how none of the enemies could immediately drop you if they hit you. This was an obvious design decision that worked well with what they made, and even in tense situations, the game usually has ways to mitigate things, like transitioning through a door to get away, or enemies being slow like the hammer guys, allowing you time to reload. Having never played any of the original Resident Evil or Silent Hill games, I didn't really have a direct comparison for this game. That said, I greatly enjoyed it, and it's made me interested in playing the inspirations behind Tormented Souls. I think for those who have but haven't played this yet, then it's definitely worth a look. If you played Tormented Souls, then let me know your thoughts about it in the comments below. If you haven't, then let me know if my thoughts want to make you try the game, or maybe they actually made you want to stay away. And of course, if you have any questions for me, then leave them down below as well. I greatly enjoyed putting this video together, and I hope you enjoyed watching it. I hope this video helped you in some small way, and if it did, then please consider leaving a like, comment, subscribe, or whatever it is you feel like doing. Thanks for watching, and have a nice day.